What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Smash JT. By now, most of us are familiar with the train wreck of a game, Skull Island Rise of Kong. It's been talked about ad nauseum by many YouTubers, including myself. But it got me thinking. I went down this rabbit hole of who GameMill Entertainment even is, how a game like this could even be developed. In my previous video talking about it, it was developed in a less than 1 year time frame, which is insanity to me. It made me want to find out more information about them, who they are, how they came to be, and what they represent as a game developer. So join me on this video as we deep dive GameMill Entertainment and how they basically are the new age of LGN, passing the torch to THQ, now passing the licensed game garbage torch to GameMill Entertainment. Hit that subscribe button, give me a like, and check out SmashJT.com for my full breakdown and analysis of who GameMill Entertainment really is. But for this video, we're going to dive into some of the similarities between LJN THQ and GameMill Entertainment, the modern day factory of shovelware garbage. The dubious legacy of publishing low quality, licensed cash grab video games has a storied history in the video game industry, one that stretches back decades and seems to find a new champion in every console generation. While it may have started back on the Atari or maybe even before then, most people know this from LJN on the NES and even migrating on its way to the Super Nintendo, somehow surviving for a few games there before finally dissipating to only pass the torch to THQ, which picked it up doing some garbage games on the NES, Super Nintendo, and then really started to flourish with the crap when it got to the next generation of consoles. And yeah, I'm sorry, Quest 64 is a terrible game. And this is coming from someone who loves RPGs, and my nostalgia just ain't there for it. I do appreciate the online humor about how Quest 64 may be better than what people think. It ain't. It's garbage. And while THQ did make it to more next-gen consoles with the Xbox 360 and PS3, and Darksiders may be what they were best known for, well, alongside with Saints Row, those games really carried them. And that's when they started to turn the corner and try to focus on making a quality experience instead of just shoveling out licensed shovelware garbage to people. They actually wanted to try and make something worthwhile. And for those of you who aren't familiar with my relationship with THQ, I really followed them closely back in the day. I had a lot of faith in their turnaround, and I feel like they were almost there. They just couldn't make it. And if you missed it, I did end up interviewing the CEO of the failed THQ, Brian Farrell, and I'll put that interview above me here if you're interested in finding out more about some insight directly from the source. That was one of my biggest interviews on this channel when I first got started, and it blew my mind how insightful he really was.
And that's a neat feeling still. We had something special, and gosh, I would have loved to seen it to greater success. But again, you got to take the good with the bad.
If you just had that 6 months more, I feel like that would have gotten you over the hump and been successful in the long run. But who knows? I mean,
But without going into all the details, there were a lot of alternatives, and you asked about what do you regret. The one alternative strategy we chose ended up in the liquidation of THQ. There were other alternatives that we could have maybe survived to see all those games through. And again, it was a call based on the information we had at the time.
But that's THQ, and they didn't make it. Now we find ourselves with a new champion carrying the torch of crap. GameMill Entertainment. And while GameMill Entertainment may not be a household name, its history of publishing poorly received licensed games has drawn the ire of the entire gaming community over the past few years. Now it is often compared to the once maligned THQ. GameMill appears to be treading a precarious path that has led other game publishers to bankruptcy, with a consistent track record of churning out tons of low-quality licensed games a la the original LJN and THQ. Here we go again. The funniest part about GameMill Entertainment is their name. They literally call themselves GameMill. They are telling you straight up that they will just produce garbage and shove it out the door. And while Skull Island Rise of Kong is exhibit A of that, with a 1 year development time for a team in Chile to put that together, it's not just that game. They've made a ton of licensed crap and shoved it out the door before it was ready. Let's take a quick look at their portfolio. Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl, which, yes, I'm sure there's going to be some diehards out there that just have some nostalgia and just love that game, even though it's kind of new on the Nintendo Switch. It's not a good game. It's floaty. It's not finished. It feels like a missed opportunity. Same thing for G.I. Joe Operation Blackout. Game's kind of fun for like 15 minutes, and then you realize it's just very repetitive, same thing, and over again, and you don't want to ever go back to it. It's just kind of like they make the game and put it there. There's nothing special or magical there. It's just they take a license and they make the game. And don't even get me started about Big Rig's Over the Road Racing, the game that's been completely bashed for countless bugs and general lack of content, and just a generic, bland game with nothing really there. Same thing for Cartoon Network Battle Crashers, where reviewers panned it for repetitive levels and simplistic gameplay. Do you see a trend here where it's literally the smallest definition of a game? Just like I said with Skull Island Rise of Kong, where it is a game, and that's about it. Like, you can press start and it plays. Like, I feel like their standards for what a video game is are set extremely low. Like, the lowest possible bar you can get to get a game out the door and sold on a store shelf. And I know there's a few people that enjoyed Cobra Kai. The Karate Kid saga continues, and it received fairly below average scores or mixed reviews at best. But again, with these kind of games, it's like most of them don't really get high scores. We're talking like the highest score I've seen from one of their games is Cruisin' Blast, which most outlets gave that a 7 or an 8. I think there were a couple that gave it an 8.5 and it maxed out there. And by far and away, Cruisin' Blast is GameMill Entertainment's best game they've ever produced. But at the end of the day, that's a port from an arcade game that already had things in place, the storyline created, everything was already there. So I don't want to give them too much credit for a game that already exists. There was a time when THQ was criticized for much of the same practices that plague GameMill today, where THQ had a couple bangers. They were pretty good games back in the day, once in a while. But far and away, you'd end up with like a Home Alone or a garbage throwaway title that's just using a movie license to sell a copy of a game. They didn't really put too much effort into making it. It ended up being a licensing deal where they would go to the company and they would sign a contract like, hey, you let us use your license, we will pay you X amount of dollars, and we will foresee that this game will sell X amount of dollars and will come out in the green because of that, no matter how bad it is. And that's exactly what these companies prey upon. The license. They don't have people looking at their history of, oh, how bad are these games? They have people at mom and pops going into the stores and, oh, let me buy this game for my kid because he likes King Kong, or he loved the movie Home Alone, or he loves Nickelodeon stuff. Like, those are the people these companies prey on. So they can get away with poor quality time and time again because the people that buy these games don't care if it's good or not. And in a way, it's a genius marketing tactic to make a lot of money without putting a lot of effort into the games. But ultimately, it always ends in failure. Like THQ and LJN that have come before, GameMill seems to be ignoring the warning signs. In an era where gamers are more discerning and vocal than ever, continuously producing low-quality titles is a recipe for disaster. It's almost ironic how the company is precisely doing what led to the downfall of publishers that came before them, speeding down a path that seems to lead directly to financial ruin. without any signs of steering away. And maybe that's because they see themselves making money right now. They're cutting the time cycle of developing a game down to under a year. For what looked to be a potential AAA title, the game was produced in under a year for Skull Island Rise of Kong, and the game now has a price point of $50 USD on Sony PlayStation 5. GameMill Entertainment's persistent emphasis on quantity over quality sends a clear message about its business model to all gamers, an eerily similar trajectory that led THQ to bankruptcy. If they continue down this path without taking any corrective actions, they might just be setting themselves up for an inevitable fall. Unless GameMill can adapt and pivot towards producing quality content, they risk following THQ's tragic direction, becoming yet another story in a long line of failures in the gaming industry. And if THQ is anything to go by with these guys, it's now or never. If you wait too long, everything you've made will go into the next game. Nobody's going to buy it, and you'll lose everything. That's what happens with these kind of companies. So while it might feel great initially, and you might be swimming in money in the first few games that you put out, and you might have tried a little harder on some of the games, and some of the titles were all right, you start pumping garbage out there time and time again, especially with licenses, it's going to end up in a bad place. That's my take on this GameMill Entertainment debauchery with Skull Island Rise of Kong, among other titles that they produced that have been just horrifically bad overall. Yes, they've had a couple that were decent, but nothing ever great. And a company that can never produce anything great and survives just basically on licenses alone is not going to be around for much longer. But unfortunately, the same breath, the game industry, it always seems to pass the torch to the next taker, the next person that comes in and says, I'm going to buy up these licenses, pay these staff minimal money, give them minimal time, get the garbage out the door, sell it, make my money, and get out. I guess if there's no laws against it, it's never going to stop. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, you stay smashing. Smash it,